Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy B-Dell. If you're new to this channel, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. But today we're going to be decoding the hidden secrets of the movie Civil War and how the perception of art imitates reality by way of imagery and symbolism, and how they covertly and strategically perpetuate the chronology of the prophetic timeline of humanity. Now, as I was telling you before, the CIA has an office in Hollywood, and Hollywood has an office in the CIA, which is the foundation of ancient occultism by way of magic realism that has a repositioning effect to where certain things in the movie embarks upon real life situations. But we're going to get into that as we get through the presentations. But first, I must demonstrate the substantial evidence and the decoding within the movie Civil War, right? Because there's an extrapolation of events that lines up with prophecy, right? Or so-called prophecy. And I'm going to demonstrate that as we get through the presentation. But first, one thing you got to understand, there's many things you got to understand about the whole concept of when you're at the apex of a civil war. One thing you got to understand that there's 7 different principles. You got the increase of partisanship, you got dysfunctional governance, then you have rumors of impeachment, then you have an extensive gap of the wealth gap, and then you also have a totalitarian dictatorship, then you have extremist ideologies being perpetuated by the media, and then you also have the rise of artificial intelligence, which is the foundation of a technocrat system, right? So one thing you gotta understand about the movie, it is basically 170 days from Leave the World Behind, right? And we're gonna get into the esoteric codex of it when you go to the Strong Concordance. And this movie actually came out, is basically 163 years since the actual Civil War, the first one in April 12th of 1861. Now, one thing you gotta understand, this is all connected to biblical prophecy. So you also have, when you go to Luke 21:24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led captive away, right? And captive is equated to 163, which is connected to the year April 12th of 1861. And to all nations, America, Jerusalem shall be trodden down, right? So this is all equated to the solar eclipse that took place and everything. And we're going to break that down as we get through the whole video. Now, as I was telling you before, the Leave the World Behind movie came out on October 25th of 2023. And the movie of Civil War, it came out on April 12th, 2024, which is 170 days apart. 170 days, when you look up the Strong Concordance, you get the Aloha, which is basically the esoteric codex for the name Samaria. Samaria is she who has a tent, which is also the symbology of the Whore of Babylon, or Mystery Babylon, because Samaria, that was basically the whore of Assyria. So you translate that all the way up until the year of 2024, that is basically talking about the Whore of Babylon, Mystery Babylon, which is America, because I was telling you before, Assyria was a branch of the Babylonian Empire, right? Now, remember when I was telling you that the perception of art imitates reality by way of symbolism, by way of many different things that's being facilitated by the media, whether it's art, books, movies, whatever. All these things must come to pass because these things has been implemented all throughout, the propagation of media. So when you go to this in the photos in the FSB Veterans Group release, Hyper Militarized Pro-War 2024 calendar. Now, this is imperative because, Russia, Iran, and China, they all work in synergy because they're basically allies to overthrow the whole system of the deep state shadow government when you're talking about the influx of a dictatorship that's based on totalitarianism. So with that being said, when you look at the depiction right here in the middle, it shows a military member, a KGB member from the Russian regime. He's standing in front of the Capitol building. Now, when you watch the movie Civil War, there's war taking place within the movie in front of the Capitol, right? Because I was telling you before, the perception of art imitates reality, right? So it's not a coincidence that both these, depictions basically have a correlation. There's an alignment there, right? Now, this is where it kind of gets crazy. So when you look at this Civil War mapping spectrum of all the geographical areas in America, there's many different task force within, the Civil War that's going to be taking place because there's going to be a great separation, and that separation is going to be based upon the Westernized forces. Then you got the Republic of California. Then you got the Loyalist states. Then you got the Florida Alliance, and then you got the Second Republic of Texas, right? So with that being said, this is all esoterically connected to the judgment of all the solar eclipses that took place in 2017, 2023, and 2024. Because I was telling you before, the alignments of the solar eclipses create the sigil of anarchy, which is an A, which is a Alf symbol, or the ancient Hebrew Tav symbol, which puts an X over the planet. And then when you look at A24, 24 is basically esoterically connected to X because X is the 24th letter of the alphabet, right? So A24 is basically signifying that there's going to be anarchy by way of an overthrowing of the government, which is connected to a form of the ideologies of a civil war that's going to be perpetuated, right? So now, that's why I said, like, when you look at this depiction, I did a video on this. It's called The Great Sign Before the Sun Sign. You see the A right here. When you look at all the solar eclipses, all the A, it basically creates this depiction of an A, which is a sigil of the Antichrist, and it's the sigilsism of anarchy. But the solar eclipse from 2017 and 2024 put an X over the planet. That is basically the symbology of A24 when you look at the top of this depiction of the Civil War map that was connected to the movie, right? So all these things work in tandem. So now, when you're talking about, the future map of the United States, when the planet is in a state of desolation, this can be a metaphor or it could be very, very much allegorical. And the reason I said that is because the flooding aspect could be that there could be an influx in a flooding of invaders invading our geographical areas to where we have to break up in groups, right? So, like I said, it can be allegorical or it could be based on a prophecy, right? Because, like I said, the flooding in itself is not a coincidence that all these things works in tandem with the solar eclipse. Then you got the future map of the United States of America after you have the earthquakes and things of that nature. When you're talking about the activation of the Madrid fault lines, all this stuff is correlated to the Civil War map, right? Because it's kind of like one of those things like in Hunger Games. We might have to break off in wards. We may have to break off and have a literal great separation just because, the planet is in a state of desolation. Now, Once you understand the alphabetical groups of the deep state shadow government, it is basically comprised of the CIA, who created the state of Israel. And also, when you're talking about the intelligence, Israeli services, intelligence groups, right? When you're talking about these, so they basically are working in synergy because they're basically in alignment to the same ideologies, right? They're both international community crime groups, right? And they're both being funded by the West, right? Which is basically being funded by the Democrats. So this is why Joe Biden, right? He is basically creating a ironclave, support for Israel amid fears of Iran attack. And this is important because not too long ago, you just had the insider paper on Twitter. They said, breaking: Iran's warns United States to stay out of fight with Israel or face attack on troops, right? All these things work in tandem, because when you understand the facilitation process of when you have an event threat within a certain geographical area, you have many different phases of preparation. You have readiness and preparation, then you have activation operations, then you have reconstitution, which is the precursor to an event threat. When you have an event threat, this is what creates the whole concept of a cyber attack, right? So who's going to be behind these cyber attacks? Because when you go to the movie, it's showing you the planet in a state of desolation. It's showing you all these cars, just like in the movie Leave the World Behind, because, as I was telling people before, this movie Civil War is actually the sequel to Leave the World Behind, right? Because, like I said, it's kind of crazy within the movie, because within the movie, the only thing that was the only cars that was able to move around were the cars for the media and the cars for the militarized groups. So it's kind of like one of those things where they already knew these things was going to come to pass. So if they already knew this, why didn't they build every commercial car with the same technology as the cars that's being facilitated by the military, by the military industrial complex? Every car on the planet should have the same technology to combat the energy of the electrical grid. So that's how you know that all these governments are working in synergy when you're talking about a global power outage, when you're talking about a cyber attack, when the grid goes down. They could have easily put that same technology in all the commercial cars, but they already knew this stuff was going to be taking place, from a futuristic standpoint, right? Because in order to create this galvanization of the New World Order system, what they have to do is they got to create these black swan events. They got to create many different negative mechanisms to basically destabilize humanity. Because, as I was telling you before, there's many different ways of attributes when you're talking about the facilitation process to basically keep humanity under a subordinate energy, right? So you have destabilization, then you have isolation, then you have synchronized chaos by way of cyber attacks that's going to be perpetuated by either China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Ukraine, United States. All these things basically is comprised of the political dimensions of the attacking process when you're talking about the overthrowing of a certain system by way of judgment, right? So, like I said, it's not a coincidence in the movie. This was what took place. This is one of the depictions in the movie, right? Just like in the Leave the World Behind, when they showed you all the Teslas. Because when you have the grid basically dematerializing, right, the electrical grid, it creates gamma radiation, and the precursor from that gamma radiation creates ionized particles that basically dismantles the photon-like spectrum, the holographic energy that creates the static electricity that controls all technological devices on the planet, right? So it's showing you, as I was telling you before, stay off the helicopters, stay off the airplanes, aircraft, because within the movie, these aircrafts was going down, which will be the precursor to 500,000 people falling out the sky in these commercial flights. Now, this is a document in the CIA that was created by the EMP task force. So it says blackout warfare, cyber attacking electrical power grids, a strategic weapon, right? This is a real documentation. Now, when you go to the table of contents, right, it's showing you how all this stuff is basically being facilitated by people who are part of the plutocracy, meaning that they created these mechanisms in order to usher in this new world order system. So how this publication was created in the year of 2021. Fast forward, now we're in the year of 2024, right? So that means that all these things are basically being engineered by way of a deep state blueprint, right? So you have all these implications. It goes into the fact, as in the movie was talking about Texas, you got the Texas blackouts that shows that what can happen and how fast. And it's talking about, the destabilization process when you're talking about New York City, because the setting in the movie was actually in New York City, just like in a Leave the World Behind. So if you will, screenshot this. I don't want to say some of these words because, I don't want to get flagged for saying some of these words. So screenshot this and read this publication yourself, the blackout warfare, right? So you got to dig into that information because it's basically in alignment to the movie, which can basically embark upon real life situations, right? So when you have a blackout, right, this creates the whole dynamic of United States government under the continuity of government, which would be controlled by FEMA under the Emergency Declaration Act that Donald Trump signed in 2020. So this is going to be created because how the United States government functions after all hell breaks loose, because continuity of government is going to be created by a form of a totalitarian order under the executive branch, right? Which is the form of a dictatorship. Because I was telling you before, the Democrats who are being controlled by the deep state shadow government, they are the ones who control the executive branch. The executive branch is basically the ones who propagate rules and regulations and ordinances to bypass Congress with executive orders, right? So that will put the planet in a state of destabilization, right? Which will basically create qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is going to be the precursor to police brutality. When you have brutality facilitated amongst the people, this is where you're going to get your civil war, because in the movie, it was the people versus the government, right? So when you have continuity of government, that's when the people, in a form of anarchy, they overthrow the government, and where the government creates an alliance with many different task force, or the ones that's being controlled by these alphabetical groups. You're going to have, it's going to be us versus them. That's what this next civil war is going to be about, right? It's going to be us versus the deep state. So like I said, so the continuity of government is the precursor to qualified immunity, right? So all this stuff is connected to biblical prophecy, because when you're talking about, the fourth book of Ezra, civil war and border closures in America, is telling you, let Egypt mourn. Egypt is another esoteric codex for the word America, and its foundations for the plague of chastisement, which is meaning that we're going to be rebuked and reprimanded, right? So you're going to have war, meteor showers, you're going to have conflict, turmoil. All these things must take place just like within the movie. Everything is going to be under an implication and afflictions that's going to be taken over by force. So you're going to have, like I said, within the movie, you had the galvanization of resources, because people didn't have no food. It was starvation. It was suffering. It was stress. It was all these things that was being created by the Civil War, right? And I had some videos, but they're not going to let me show these videos, so I just kind of like extracted them or whatever. So we're not going to do no videos today within the presentation. But one thing you got to understand, you got to understand the esoteric language of the Bible. Anybody who's telling you to not read the Bible or whatever, they're basically, giving you falsified information, because it's not one of those things where you read it from a standpoint to where you believe in monotheistic belief systems. You read it because it's aligned with the blueprint of the timeline of judgment that's going to be propagated on American soil, right? So that's why when you go to the fourth book of Ezra, it's talking about the dragon and the Carmonians waging war on American soil, right? So you have the Carmonians; those are the Iranians, right? The dragon is China, because as I was telling you before, China and Russia and Iran all work in synergy. They're allies. So it tells you right here. Hold on. It tells you right here in the fourth book of Ezra. A vision of terrifying warfare. Behold, a terrifying sight appearing from the east, which is Eastern America. And then you have China, Russia, allies, and you're going to have machines of war. So it's the same thing that actually took place within the movie. You had an influx of other immigrants infiltrating that area, because I'm going to get into that as we get through the presentation, because you got to understand there was the Global Relief Fund. They are basically the ones who control the refugees who entered in by way of the democratic order, right? When you're talking about the expansion of borders. So all this stuff correlates with Iran, Russia, and China, right? Because they're going to be infiltrated from the inside out with the Trojan horse theory, right? So you have the Carmonians raging wrath amongst the people, to where it's going to cause a state of desolation. Now, hold on. Now you got World War III on American soil, right? Because what you got to understand is that the Civil War is going to be the precursor to the World War, right? That's what's going to be taking place. And the World War is actually going to be taking place on American soil, right? Because I told you, as we in this purification process, America has to be judged for the implications of what they did to indigenous land, right? So that's why you're going to have civil conflict, which is going to be the precursor to disorganization. The precursor to disorganization means that America is going to be destabilized. Dang, my nose is itching. Now, everything as far as like in ancient occultism, everything is being facilitated by symbolism. Symbolism is going to be their downfall. When you look at her shirt, right, it is basically showing you the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? It's basically showing you this is symbology of the four horsemen. The four horsemen is basically signifying that there's going to be affliction on the planet, right? So that's why when you go to Isaiah 19:2, it tells you the Lord says, I will stir up civil war in Egypt. Egypt is basically America, as I was telling you before, because the heart of the solar eclipse that took place on April 8th, 2024, the inception point of it was at Cairo, Egypt, which is Cairo, Illinois, right? So I will stir up civil war in Egypt and turn brother against brother and neighbor against neighbor. Rival cities will fight each other and rival kings will struggle for power, right? So like I said, that destabilization process has to happen by way of the grid going down. When you have the grid going down, that's when you're going to have people in a state of self-preservation. They're going to try to preserve the resources, right? You know, they're going to try to preserve the food, the money, the artillery, all these things, right? They're going to try to, you know, a lot of people are going to basically going to be clicking up in order to have self-preservation. So as I was telling you before, the Global Relief Fund, right? The Global Relief Fund was basically it's an organization that basically houses in and it's an organization that's connected to FEMA that takes care of the refugees that came in from the borders, right? That's what this is basically talking about. So you got to look up the publication. I'm not going to put the publication up on here because there's some wordage within the publication that they're not going to, you know, YouTube is not going to let me put that up. So look up the Global Relief Fund Foundation. So it's showing you right here, you got the Global Relief Foundation working in tandem with FEMA. And this is where you have FEMA camps, right? So that's one of those things where when you don't have the resources to combat the destabilization process to where the point where you're going to be isolated and being controlled by synchronized chaos, this is where you're going to run to the government for their help. And their help is not going to be really help, because their help is going to be one of those things where it's going to be based on depopulation, right? Because like I said, there's an extraction process. They want to extract many different demographics of people off the planet. Now, what you gotta understand is, like I said, symbolism is going to be their downfall. When you look at the background right here, you got George Washington. Now, in the movie, you've seen Joe in the background on the picture in the movie, you've seen George Washington. Now, George Washington's legacy was revered by soldiers fighting on both sides of the Civil War. So that's how you know that they fund both sides of the war. That is basically a westernized construct. That is a westernized blueprint on how you destabilize society, and you create a Hegelian dialectic principle by having problem, reaction, solution. Because when you fund both sides of the war, the enemy is actually the solution, right? As I was telling you before, because the enemy who is the one who controls FEMA. He's the enemy is the one who controls the Global Relief Foundation, right? They are the ones who control all these alphabetical groups, right? So that's why it's imperative to understand what's going on. Now, this is an opinion piece claims a new Civil War movie is an explosive warning against Trump takeover. Opinion: American democracy seems to be teetering on the brink of a collapse, because, like I said, Nineveh shall be overthrown. Nineveh is Mystery Babylon, which is America, right? Which was a part of the Assyrian Empire. Because anything, when you understand Greco-Roman culture is basically the precursor of ancient Babylon. Ancient Babylon during the biblical times is now, you translate it over now, is democracy. So everything under liberalism and democracy is the foundation of ancient Babylon. So American democracy seems to be teetering on the brink of a collapse, and writer and director Alex Garland exploits the feeling for unbearable, despairing suspense and censor with the Civil War, a vision of a near future in which the United States is no longer united. Because, like I said, this is the Great Separation. So the solar eclipse that took place, this is going to be the Great Separation taking place within the Great Awakening period. People are going to be separating to galvanize resources, right? Everybody's going to be in a state of survival mode if this actually takes place. So this is why it says right here, 72 hours until all hell breaks loose. Breaking, Donald Trump alert. Now, Trump threatens reaction pending sham trial and fundraising email, 72 hours until all hell breaks loose. So this is a real publication that came out. Now, there wasn't a lot that took place within the movie, because the movie in itself is self-explanatory, because they gave you all the nuggets and everything when you're talking about leave the world behind. So the precursor was the Civil War, because everything would basically be destabilized. Because I was telling you before in the movie, leave the world behind, the Cabal, I got to go back to this now, because it says democracy seems to be teetering on the brink of a collapse, because democracy is the epitome of the Cabal. The Cabal is the deep state shadow government. Remember in the leave the world behind that we're talking about the Cabal. So the collapse takes place when you have the grid dematerialized, no banking system, right? Just the guy, because I think he was a trader on Wall Street, the guy in Leave the World Behind. You got the destabilization of all, electronic devices. You can't listen to no cars, no cell phones, no radio, no nothing. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing that's going to be taking place in order to combat what's going to happen within the simulation when the simulation shuts down, right? So that's why I said it's connected to Leave the World Behind. It's a precursor to it. And there's a third movie that's connected to it, and we're going to get into that as we get through the presentation. Now, one thing you got to understand, a lot of people to be like, B-Dell, how do all these movies know what's going to be taking place? How do they know this? How do they know this and that? How do they know that the Simpsons predict this and that? This is what they do. They're not really predicting anything, right? Because when you understand Goetic magic by way of the Gnostic texts, right? What they do is they conjure up many different entities to give them the information, and the entities they tell them to implement these ideologies within the movie, right? To where we have the choice of free will. Because they, like I said, it's under the threefold law. They got to tell you the truth in the movies. They got to tell you the truth in the cartoons. They got to tell you the truth in the books. But it's up to you to have the spiritual fortitude to decipher if it's real or fake, right? Hold on for a second. It's up to you to decipher what's taking place. So now, that's why when you go to this, it's basically telling you the foundation of Goetic magic. Goetic magic, what happens is you have the, let me see. Well, this is basically showing you depiction. This is the depiction of a king or an emperor, and he conjured up demons or archons. Because as I was telling you before, when I broke that the archons and the firmament video down, because an archon and a draconian are basically one and the same, right? So this is why they do Faustian bargains. A Faustian bargain is basically when you have a person sell their soul for information. So the same thing actually translates when you're talking about Goetic magic, right? Goetic magic is when you conjure up demons in order to galvanize information to control humanity. So that's why when you go to El's Holy Angel, Revelation 17:17, it says the evil reptilian gave power to the beast. So that means that the beast has the occultic knowledge to basically conjure up these entities, these draconians or these archons, because the archons are the ones who control the simulation. So whoever controls the simulation controls the prophetic events on the planet. So that's why, you know, when you're looking at this conjuring process right here, you see them basically getting an extrapolation of information from the archonic forces. And this is where, like I said, a lot of these people are, like I said, they're not prophets. They're just getting information from the archons who control the simulation, because the archons are the ones who know what's going to be happening within the simulation. So that's why, you know, as far as art imitates reality, that's why you know that certain things is going to be taking place in a movie actually translates over into real life situations. Now we're going to go through the conjuring process. So this is how they get their information, and they put the stuff in the movies, right? So the first conjuration, you have I open this triangle onto you. A triangle is basically a trilateral connection of a tetrahedron. So you have the triangle onto you so that you may hear requests and help me fulfill and manifest my will. Because like I said, when you manifest anything, that means the universe must bend to your will by way of certain information that you know. Because, you know, when you do rituals or whatever, you basically manipulate the ethers. When you manipulate the ethers, that's when you're able to manifest and bring certain things into fruition within the simulation because of the information that you got from the archonic forces, right? So I ask you answer all my questions with truth and clarity, and grant me your wisdom without delay. If you choose to show yourself in form and shape, I ask that be pleasing and invoke fear. So like I said, end of demonic forces being invoked, come forward. So this is how they do. This is what they do. This is why they do all the rituals in Hollywood or whatever. The reason they do these rituals because they want to conjure up these entities. They conjure up these entities because the entities are the ones who have the information, right? And they put the information in the movies. That is part of the contract of the Faustian bargain. Yeah, we're going to give the demonic forces, these draconian entities, these archons, yeah, we giving the information, but you must put them in the movies or you'll be penalized for it because now you be breaking galactic law. Then you have the second conjuration. I invoke and conjure you, daemon. Because I was telling you another word for daemon, demon, or democracy, Cabal, Enlil, Yahweh, Moloch, All this stuff works in tandem because these are all Babylonian rituals to control humanity. I invoke and conjure you, Damon, and ask that you appear and show yourself visibly to me within the triangle in a fair, comely shape without any deformity. For I seek your guidance, wisdom, and power, right? El's holy and Jill, Revelation 17, evil reptilian gave power to the beast, right? So that's the process of how they conjure up these entities, right? So this is all esoterically connected to the upper hierarchy of shamanism when you're talking about Goetic magic. So when you're talking about conjuring up entities to get certain information and you put the information in the movies, this is the process, right? This is the process in Hollywood. Because like I said, the CIA has an office in Hollywood and Hollywood has an office in the CIA. And everything in Hollywood is based on dark black magic. The dark black magic is based on the upper hierarchy of Goetic magic. The upper echelon of Goetic hierarchy has been said to include Satan, the highest Leviathan, as the great serpent, the four great kings, and some even suggest Lilith as a place here, right? This is to say that there are more than 72 demonic forces that demolators may acknowledge if they work exclusively with the Goetic hierarchy, right? All this is connected to Gnosticism, right? The Gnostic texts and the archons. This may not be true at all for the Goetic demolators. Keep this in mind when working with Goetia as an option for additional complementary influences when choosing the names for all your creating framework for which you work for. Then you have, there should be no need to really invoke higher kings in order to force demonic forces to appear. However, you may choose to invoke a Mayaman in conjunction with the daemon. You are invoking or to invoke four great kings during your standard elemental circle construct. Because an elemental, an archon, a draconian are basically one and the same because the elementals are the ones who manipulate the elements, right, to control the simulation. So standard elemental circle construction, some Goetic demolators believe that invoking a Mayaman combined with the reassertion of the first and second conjurations make for more powerful results. I agree. Some believe you can perform the invocation of a Mayaman or in Satan in your highest demonic force 2 or 3 times for maximum potency. I did not try this and I didn't really see the need for performing each invocation more than once. Do what works for you. So all this works in tandem, right? So, like I said, what they do within these movies is basically an extrapolation of futuristic events. Now, you had the movie Leave the World Behind, right? You had the movie Leave the World Behind. Then the precursor to that, you got Civil War. And then you got this movie that's going to be coming out in January, right? I think it's in January or December or something. But this movie right here is basically telling you the beginning points of how the grid shut down. So it's actually going in reverse after the Civil War movie. Because it's going to tell you how the grid shuts down, because it's going to be showing you how back in 1954, you had America working in synergy with Russia, because Russia, they understand our satellite system. So like I said, when you understand the technological aspects of satellite technology or whatever, you know, Russia, you know, they controlled the great majority of that during the time period in the 1950s when they was working with the United States. So it was actually showing you the beginning points of history of how they built the power grid system and things of that nature and how they control it. So in this movie, it's going to show you how the power grid goes down, and it's going to basically show you the beginning points of how you got to the point of leave the world behind. So you got to watch this movie because it's basically a esoteric alignment to the puzzle piece. Now, also, like I said, all these movies, one day I'm going to do a video, and I'm going to combine all these movies together, and I'm going to break them down because, in my opinion, I think, you know, almost every movie on the planet has an esoteric connection to it. You know, that'd be one of those videos. It'd be like 8 hours long or whatever. But this movie right here, the Purge election year, you know, so it's kind of coincidence that, you know, when the planet is in a state of anarchy, anarchy is a precursor to destabilization. When you destabilize demographics of people, they're going to be in a state of survival to where they got to create militias. So just like in the Purge election year movie, they also had, you know, the purification process as they was purging, right? So that's why, you know, just like in the Leave the World Behind movie, when the grid went down, that's when they went underground, the elite, the plutocracy. Just like in Purge election year, when the planet was in a state of desolation, everybody was fighting and stuff like that, purging each other off. The elite, you know what I'm saying, they was able to hide themselves. They had high security. So the same thing actually translates to this movie of Leave the World Behind, Civil War, and the Great Purge of election year. So it's not a coincidence that the movie Civil War came out the same time of the election year that we're going to be having in November, right? So all this stuff is connected. So that's what you got to understand. All this stuff is basically connected. So as you know, for the people coming in, I'm gonna do a quick rundown real fast. You know, because this movie, like I said, is very self-explanatory. It didn't really have a lot of, you know, esoteric messages in it or whatever. But like I said, from October 25th of 2023 to April 12th, 2024, that is exactly 170 days apart. So Leave the World Behind came out on October 25th, and Leave the World Behind came out on April 12th. 170 days apart. So that's connected to this scripture of Luke 21:24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captives, 163, right? So that's connected to the fact that the movie came out on the anniversary of the first Civil War, which was on April 12th, 1861. 163 years apart, and it's connected to the scripture of Luke 21:24. Now, 170 days apart from Leave the World Behind, right? And 170 strong concordance of Oholoha, you got is basically the symbology of Samaria, who is the whore of Assyria. Assyria is a nomenclature title for ancient Babylon, mystery Babylon, which is America, or Nineveh. Nineveh shall be overthrown by way of judgment. Now, as I was telling you before, the perception of art imitates reality by way of imagery and symbolism. In the movie, they were showing you militarized forces and groups in front of the Capitol. This is the depiction of the movie right here, right? Not a coincidence. Then you also got to understand that the A24 map, like I said, this is esoterically connected to the alignments of the solar eclipses, the path of totality. Also within the movie of Civil War, there was a guy, he had a red hat on and he had the path of totality on his hat. Now the coincidence, so now you got to understand that they make these movies 2, 3, 4 years prior to the, you know, the date it premieres to the public. So one thing you got to understand is that all this stuff is being, you know, this is it's all premeditated, basically. Everything's premeditated. So now when you look at from A24 Civil War, the map, A24, when you see that at the top right there, when you look at the sigil system of all the solar eclipses, it forms a sigil of anarchy and a sigil of the Antichrist. Then the solar eclipse from 2017 to 2024 put an X over the planet, and X is the 24th letter of the alphabet, where you get the symbology of A24 of Civil War, right? So it's not a coincidence that the path to totality is connected to the future map of the United States. So like I said, the flooding could be allegorical when you're talking about the flooding of immigrants and militarized groups on American soil, which will basically create the Civil War. So the flooding in itself, like I said, it could be metaphorical or it could be allegorical, right? But we all know that, you know, the great majority of the tectonic plates and the new Madrid fault lines, you know, is going to be, is going to cause desolation over the course of time. So you got all this stuff taking place, right? So all this stuff, when you're talking about Iran warns the United States to stay out of the fight with Israel or face attack on troops, because Iran, they are the ones who control, well, they are the ones who basically work in tandem with Russia and China, right? So that's how you know that the cyber attack in itself can be facilitated by one of these entities, right? That's why I showed you in the movie, just like in Leave the World Behind, and in this movie right here, you showing you the depiction of civil war. You got the grid going down, no cars working except militarized cars, right? So that's why you got to read this right here, screenshot this, as I was telling you in the beginning of the presentation. Read this EMP. This is basically a EMP task force simulation manual. So you got blackout warfare, cyber attack, electrical power grids, a new strategic weapon. And then you got to read this right here. You got to read the table of contents. It's giving you a whole breakdown of what's going to be taking place in the future, right? So read this, screenshot it. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, it's one of those things. It wasn't a whole lot with this movie, but it was enough to piece all the puzzles together. It was enough to piece all the puzzles together, because one thing you got to understand is that, you know, we're going through a great purification process, right? Because all this stuff is based on destabilization, isolation, and synchronized chaos in order to get a form of order, right? Because as I was telling you before, they're going to use the Trojan horse ideology to basically infiltrate us from the inside out by way of the activation of the sleeper cells that will basically be the precursor to the Civil War. When you have the expansion of borders, when you have the expansion of borders, that's when you can create these, the Carmonians, the Iranians, all these people, you know, coming in at the borders, right? So like I said, man, it's one of those things where you got to activate your spiritual eye and stop looking at these movies as a form of entertainment, because these movies are basically, these are esoteric messages, right? Esoteric messages that's being facilitated by the deep state shadow government, who uses Goetic magic to conjure up demons to give them the information to put in the movies, right? So this has happened. This is a process of the repositioning effect, meaning that all this stuff that takes place in the movie has to embark upon real life situations. They got to give you the truth in the movies, right? That, because if they don't give you the truth in the movies, they'll be breaking cosmic law. They'd be breaking cosmic order, right? Because that was the process of getting the power. They had, in order for them to facilitate the power and sacrifice humanity by way of the information that they got from the archons, that means that, you know, they got to give you the truth in the movies, meaning that you have to have your own free will. It's either you side with them or you have your own mindset by way of individuality, right? Meaning that you separate from the system. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. Get this video out there. End of transmission.
10:14. We will put an end to this madness.
It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you, and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage taking on another day when I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire, cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling, when it's wrong you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the this a completion, the selfish proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. Niggas try to ride away but end up getting seasick. The sleep can feel my words like Braille and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery honor. Payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away, but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.